What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916, getting down fresh out. You know how we do it over here. I'm here with my man AJ, and man, I tell you guys, I keep bringing you these special guests. AJ is a veteran, and he also worked in law enforcement. So I want to kind of get his story because he has a story, and he's no longer in law enforcement, but all that's led to where he is today. So, AJ, if you could share with our audience your background and your military experience and how you got into law enforcement.
Sure. First of all, I didn't tell you this earlier, but I really wanted to thank you for letting me come on. I sincerely appreciate it. It means a lot. So a little bit about me is that typical adult or typical childhood in Arizona. Went to high school. After I got out of high school, I got into tech and I got into computers and all that type of stuff and databases and all that. Did that for a few years. Made way too much money at 18 years old, and I should not have been making that much money. I had a beard and a big lifted truck. So, but then 9/11 happened, and after 9/11 happened, that just kind of I didn't know really what to do anymore, and I just kind of felt lost. And I think a lot of people did as well when that happened. And so then I joined the Air Force, and I was a little bit older when I joined the Air Force. I was 21. Normally people go in at 17, 18 years old. Did my time in the Air Force. I did 4 years, and I loved and hated every minute of it. And I was married. I had one kid at the time. I'm no longer married to that woman. I still have the kid though. So I have three children now. But so after my law enforcement career, I was decided. I'm sorry. After my Air Force career.
What made you pick the Air Force, if I might ask you?
So I was working with a bunch of tech people in IT, and we were doing databases and networking and this and that. And after 9/11 happened, and I needed to do something, I needed to do some service. I started talking to a bunch of the people that I worked with, and all of them were veterans. So I was looking at I talked to the guy that was the Marines. He told me what he did, and I looked at the job he was doing, and then this and that. And then the Air Force guys, everybody around was like, man, go in the Air Force. It's the best. Go in the Air Force. They got the best food. They got the best looking women. It's the best of everything.
Yeah.
And so that's what made me actually decide, because I have a brother that was, but I didn't really talk to him about the services, but nobody in my family was military. So I didn't have any background. I didn't have any legacy or anything like that. And just from talking from my coworkers, I said, okay, Air Force is the one to be. So I went specifically to the recruiter for what I wanted to get into. In the Air Force, that training was super difficult. Had some circumstances with my son being born, and I was pulled out of training for 5 months to be at the hospital with my now 20-year-old. He's a miracle child. So did my 4 years, and as I was getting out of my 4 years, I was living in Georgia with my ex-wife, or then wife, now ex-wife, and my dad was DPS. He was an Arizona State Trooper. My brother was an Arizona State Trooper. And it was just a natural progression to go into law enforcement. It was in my blood. It was in my background. When I was 14 years old, I went into the Mesa Police Explorers. I was an explorer for a few years. So I move into my law enforcement career. I move out from Georgia, come back home, and started the law enforcement academy, and then was on my way. So I'm 25 years old. I'm in the police academy. I'm married. I've got one kid. I've got one kid that's on the way. And then I was very successful at my law enforcement career. I did 9 years on patrol. While I was in patrol, I was also part-time SWAT, and I was a crisis negotiator with the SWAT team. And then I specialized in patrol. I did what's called criminal interdiction. So I was looking for gun smuggling, human trafficking, identity theft, all of the big stuff. I didn't care about speeding. But I worked at the Phoenix metropolitan area. Even though I was a state trooper, I worked the Phoenix metropolitan area. And then at my 9-year point, I became a detective with special investigations. And special investigations, we did anything that was high liability to the state, officer involved shooting. So say little Podunk, Arizona had a police shooting, and they didn't have the resources to investigate it. My team would go. And I also got involved in child crimes. So I started investigating. I got trained up in investigating that. And so then as I'm going through my law enforcement career, what was happening was I was getting more and more and more involved into the job. And law enforcement is an inherently cool job. You get to drive fast. You get all kinds of good training. And I was very, very fortunate and very, very lucky that I worked for the second largest state or agency in the state. So we had a lot of money. We had a lot of training. We had a lot of funding. We had new cars. We had new guns. When the recession hit in 08 and 09, yeah, there was a long period of time where we went without raises. We went without quality equipment and all that good stuff. But for the most part, the training was good. The people were great. And it was a really, really good experience as far as doing good for your community, wanting to help people. And that's kind of one of the things. I'll break off on a tangent real quick here. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand about law enforcement is that I do truly believe, from having worked it, that 90% of the people that get into law enforcement are to help, are to be in the community helping, and to just want to help people. There's assholes in every bunch. There's ones that screw it up in every bunch, and that's the law enforcement's no exception. So I'm doing my thing. I'm getting better at my job. But as I'm getting better at my job, my I get divorced, which is part and parcel for being a cop. Every cop has at least 2 divorces underneath them. But I'm getting further and further away from my family. I'm getting more and more into the job, and I'm caring more about, work. Home sucks. I don't want to deal with my wife and my kids and my family. I get to go to work and be a badass. And then when I became a detective, I mean, I was literally one phone call away and I had a plane landing and I was flying anywhere in the state to go on an investigation. So I was thinking I was Billy Badass in my mind, but I was being a complete dick at home. So I'm dealing with, and law enforcement is inherently traumatic. You're dealing with people's worst days. You're dealing with their lowest, they might have made a mistake, yeah, but it's still the lowest moment in their lives. You're dealing with dead bodies all the time. You're dealing, it's particularly being a state trooper, I dealt with a lot of deaths and accident investigations from car crashes. You're dealing with suicides. You're dealing with all that type of stuff. And then moving into the child crime stuff, it wears on you mentally. Um, one particular instance that happened was a shooting in Sholo, Arizona. And I was not involved in the shooting. I was 150 miles away when the shooting occurred. It was my team. A police officer got shot and killed up in Sholo. And this was in 2016. So my unit got called. And at the time, I know I'm leaving a little bit out here, but divorced my ex-wife, have 2 kids with my ex, got remarried to an absolutely amazing woman who puts up with all my stupidity now. And so I'm with my wife, who now at that time back in 2016, and my ex and 2 kids actually live in that same little town, Sholo, which is about 150 miles away from Phoenix.
Okay.
So I get called up to Sholo. We're doing the investigation for the law enforcement shooting. The police officer was shot and killed. Suspect still on the run while my team gets deployed, and we're dealing with the dead body of the police officer and all that. And it was just extremely traumatic to me. And I don't know why this is the thing that bothered me. I wasn't involved with the shooting, but I was with the officer's body when for the remainder of the evening at the hospital and just dealing with him. And it really just affected me. Why? I don't know. So the suspect that got shot and killed by the SWAT team, and then again, I was still working all that scene as well. There's 2 parts of the shooting of the officer and then the shooting of the suspect, and I was there for all of it. So after that, everything just kind of seemed to go on a rapid downfall. And I was coping with alcohol, drinking way, way, way too much. It was creating a bigger separation and divide in my personal life with my kids, with my wife, and I was, I just wanted to be at work. And why did this one particular instance bother me? I don't know. So moving into January of 2017, 2 things occurred. I spoke up against corruption in the police department, which that never ends well. And I got injured. So that's when my back, I had a disc that herniated, causing extreme pain. I didn't know it was a disc herniation. I was still working through it, and my boss was asking me. I should have been put on immediately light duty and sent for, like, hey, what's wrong with your back? Go fix that. But that's not what happened because I was in denial. I was like, I'm fine. I mean, I'm literally limping around the office. I'm like, I'm fine. Going out on deployments. I'm like, I'm fine. I'll be fine. So I'm dealing with serious back pain. I spoke up against corruption. And then March 19th, which was St. Patrick's Day of 2017, my dumbass was drinking too much. And my dumbass got into a fight with my wife, and I pushed her. So I was drinking too much, and she was trying to leave, and I don't remember specifically what happened, whether she was trying to give me keys or whatever. And I said, get away, and I pushed her. And that caused her to fall, and she got scared. She didn't know what to do, and she called 911.
Mm.
She called 911. Pinal County Sheriff's Office arrived. I already knew what was going to happen. So I'm sitting outside waiting. They go inside and they talk to her. The deputy comes out and tells me to stand up and put my hands behind my back. And that was the end of my law enforcement career.
Mm.
So I got arrested. I spent 20 hours in jail. I was then put on administrative leave while they went through the process of the administrative investigation. I had a criminal investigation against me by Pinal County Sheriff's Office that, because I was arrested, that had to go to the county attorney, and the county attorney had to make their charging decision and all that. While waiting for that to happen, I was on administrative leave. I'm dealing with post-traumatic stress. I wasn't allowed to drink, and I was a good boy, and I didn't violate anything like that. So I'm dealing with all the bullshit, all the mental trauma, the criminal investigation, the administrative investigation. So long story short, all charges dropped, dismissed. My wife and I are still together. At the end of that investigation, though, the administrative one, I was told I was going to be suspended. I was going to be moved from the current position that I was in, and I'm going to be put in some BS position. Okay, fine. I'll take my licks. I was wrong. I was 100% wrong. I own up to everything that I did, which is why I'm sitting here telling you this, and it's going to go seen by however many people. But remember, I had said earlier that I spoke up against corruption in the police department.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it went from we're going to get moved and out of your position to now you're going to be terminated. So I was terminated from law enforcement, and that just left a huge, empty, gaping hole in who I was, because I didn't know anything else besides law enforcement. So it was at that point in time I was terminated from law enforcement, and then I didn't know what to do. My wife was, she stuck by my side through the entire thing. And I want to make it clear that I don't fault her for picking up the phone and calling 911 at all. She was scared. She didn't know what to do. I think she did the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now looking back at what happened, where I was and where I am, it was the right thing to do. It needed to happen. And I can't deny that. I can't sit here and make bullshit excuses, because it was 100% on me. So that led me, I went back to school, I finished my degree, and that kind of led me down the path of what I'm doing now.
Okay. And for the people out there, what is it you're involved with now?
So a couple things I'm involved with. So in when I was injured, I had a same back injury, but my discs herniated, and then it went back in, and then it herniated again. So now I was out of law enforcement, and I needed something for the pain. And I got a brother that's a stoner, so I called him up and says, "Hey man, I heard that cannabis works. Do you have anything?" So he says, "Yeah." So I'm out of law enforcement, and he brings me a little nug. I hadn't smoked weed since I was like 18, 19 years old, hadn't touched it. And I took a hit, and like 50% of my back pain was gone, like immediately. So I was like, okay. So I started using cannabis for my back pain, which then I'm going to college full time. I'm, using cannabis for my back pain. And I started to see like the medicinal properties of medical cannabis, and not just using it to sit around and, get stoned all day long and play video games, but like, okay, how can I use this for my pain and all that? So I got into the medical cannabis world, and that I'm now a member of what's called Arizona NORML. NORML is the National Organization for the Reformation of Marijuana Laws, and the Arizona branch is just, part of the national one. So I became a board member of Arizona NORML and got heavily involved in politics regarding medical cannabis and regarding bringing cannabis to the people for people who want to use it recreationally. I don't care. Use it recreationally. That's totally fine. But I see so much more medicinal value. And real quick, if I could tell you that when I was dealing with, like I said, my kids lived in Sholo at the time, so I was having to drive back and forth from Phoenix to Sholo. I was having to pass that same place where the officer was shot and killed. Lots of trauma, having to deal with all the mental aspects of not dealing with the mental trauma, and still having to pass that area and all that. I just was too much to handle. So one particular night, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, smoke in my kitchen, and all of a sudden I had this just like mental breakthrough. And next thing you know, I find myself crying in my kitchen, 1:30 in the morning, and it's just all coming out. And I didn't know what the hell was happening to me. I didn't know if it was a panic attack or what the case was going on, but all of these emotions are just starting to come to me. And I was thinking about the shooting and the circumstances and all of that happened. And it's like all of a sudden my brain and my emotions connected. And then I was able to like take a step back and look at the trauma that had happened mentally, and it allowed me to heal mentally from dealing with that. And then from that moment on the medical cannabis side of the house, that was kind of like my breakthrough. Like, oh, there might be something to this. You know, again, when you're not just using it to sit around and get stoned, when you're using it for medicinal purposes. So from that, I got involved in Arizona Normal, started seeing the medicinal part of it, and now a couple of years ago, I came up with the idea that I want to help cops and I want to help the cannabis community because I fell in love with the cannabis community. I fell in love with these people who, come to find out, they were dealing with the same stuff that cops deal with, and PTSD, and guys who'd been to prison and all that good stuff. And it's traumatic. I'm sure you could tell many traumatic
Yeah.
stories. So I came up with, and I started my own podcast. So, and then my podcast came to fruition because what I say is I want to show the human side of law enforcement to the cannabis community, and I want to show the human side of the cannabis community to law enforcement, and I want to bridge the gap between the two. We're not at a place yet where cops in Arizona, or there's a state, New Jersey, that they can use it. There's some stipulations, but I want to get to a point where I can have these open, just like we talked just a little bit earlier about just having communication and just talking. And then now, as more and more time goes on, it's becoming more and more accepted, and it's becoming more and more the norm. And I want to be able to show, like, it's not just, the dude and the stoners and, ever just sitting around getting baked every day. It's intelligent, articulate, educated people that are using it for medicinal purposes. And like I said, if you want to use it for recreational, that's fine. That I have no problem with that.
Do you think that they should implement more um, PTSD type courses within law enforcement? Because I mean, nobody's talking about uh, what you deal with as somebody in law enforcement when you come upon a lady who's done something horrendous to her child, or this guy who's participated in this crime, and you're trying to process all this, and the person at home, oh man, that guy, this and that, you're saying that this person, they shouldn't have the channel the job, but then when you look at the background of some of the criminals and stuff, they've mentally processed and not had any counseling, and what's led to them now being some of these guys, they don't want to admit it, but they're serial killers,
Yep.
guys who have murdered multiple gang members, and they act like, oh man, that guy's cool. No, he's got some mental issues.
Yes.
So have there been any talk within the political arena to provide more counseling so that law enforcement can deal with a lot of these issues? Because I know, like you said, alcoholism is a big one because they're trying to cope with a lot of stuff. And
Yes.
I've also seen that in in the military where guys come back and they're trying to figure out how to cope with having seen these dead bodies
Yes.
over in a foreign country, and now they're trying to live a normal life, and nobody's talking about that. There's not a big conversation, and I have some friends in them, ex-military vets that are trying to get cannabis passed in all the states so they can use that, so they can get off the pharmacy stuff.
Yes.
Because that's their biggest adversary. Not is their biggest opponent is the pharmacy, because they don't want these guys using cannabis. They want to have them dependent on the chemicals.
Say that louder and more for the people in the back.
Yeah,
that is exactly what's happening.
The pharmacy companies are lobbying against cannabis use with people who have come back in the military dealing with post-traumatic syndrome, because they would be losing a large chunk of their revenue, which they're contracted with the government to provide medical, pharmaceutical, prescriptions to these guys, which isn't really helping. It's just making them more dependent, and a lot of these guys are getting strung out.
I've had several vets on my podcast that it's called the blue to green. I should say that blue to green. Blue law enforcement, green cannabis. I've had a lot of vets on who were telling me, two in particular, that were telling me they were prescribed 600 pills a month for PTSD. PTS. I don't like the term disorder.
Yeah.
PTS.
Yeah.
I say PTSD just because it's been rolled off the tongue for years now, and they're prescribing opiates for this stuff. Now, the VA has done a better job recently of of understanding the research and coming down off of that. But what you asked a question about, is there conversations being had? There are conversations that are being had, but a lot of it's bullshit and a lot of it's lip service. And what it comes down to is strong leadership in the law enforcement community. It comes down to good, strong leaders at the top that are recognizing the fact that everybody processes PTSD differently, PTS differently. Everybody deals, how you process it is different than I process. Also, something that bothered you may not bother me. You said, I wasn't involved in that shooting. I'm not going to sit here and try to tell stories about how I came in and saved the day. No, not at all. I didn't draw my gun. I didn't fire or anything like that. It was just dealing with the entire emotional investment of this dead police officer. There are in the state of Arizona, there's what's called the Tiger Act, where officers who have been involved in certain calls can get more and additional services. What needs to happen is there are police agencies that's just lip service. They pay their little fee to an organization that provides a few counseling services, and that's it. Okay, you did your 8 counseling services, that's it. And then there are law enforcement agencies where, from the top down, they are embracing a culture of um, mental health and physical health too, which absolutely ties into your mental health. So I'm sorry, you're not going to be mentally fit if you're not physically fit to some degree, or doing something for your physical fitness, whether it's yoga, whether it's lifting weights, whatever the case may be. But what's happening is this is my personal opinion, is that, and I never went to combat, I never went overseas, I never did anything like that. But what I did was over a decade of law enforcement. And when military goes overseas and sees absolutely horrific things, they come home. And when law enforcement goes to the job every day, they get to come home at the end of their shift, but then go right back to the same stuff every day for a 15, 20, 25-year career. They get tied up in all of the BS regarding the paperwork and, whatever the political climate is can we arrest these people? Can we not arrest these people? Like, what are we doing here? And then the dead bodies and the dead kids and the rapes and the horrible things that happen. And they don't get to process any of that. And that is my personal belief, that you're going to have better outcomes with citizens, with the public, if they are mentally fit, if they are physically fit. You're going to have less bad shootings. Shootings are going to happen.
Yeah.
Shootings are going to happen. People are going to pull guns. People are going to get shot. It's going to happen. You're going to have less physical altercations because you're going to have officers that are just more well-rounded. They're thinking more clearly. They're thinking better. And what's happening now is ketamine treatments are being introduced. I've never done a ketamine treatment, so I can't speak on that. However, I have spoken to people who have done ketamine treatments to deal with it, and they can't say enough good things about it. Psilocybin mushrooms is being introduced.
Yeah.
MDMA is being introduced. And on the cannabis side of the house, I personally believe that what's happened is we've gone from, a whole lot of nothing to overprescribing to now let's go to psychedelics. And they've actually kind of left out this cannabis part of it for the mental health. Whereas if you talk to anybody who's used it for mental health reasons, I am not saying everybody on the planet should use cannabis. There are people who shouldn't touch it. I'm not saying that it's the cure-all for anything. It's not. But what it does allow you to do is it allows you to attach to your emotions and process things.
Yeah.
And it to me personally, it's a stopgap between like a full-blown psychedelic experience and nothing. And it allows me, like for my back pain, like I said, I've had fusion surgery only a few months ago. So I'm just still recovering from that. But on the mental health side of the house, it allows me to attach to my emotions. It allows me to think more clearly. It allows me to process things. And that, unfortunately, is something that law enforcement can't touch right now. Said New Jersey is the only state that has been allowed to. But I'm having conversations with cops every day. I'm having conversations with sheriffs. I'm having conversations with sheriff's candidates. And they're like, if it works and we've made it recreationally legal, why can't cops use it?
Yeah.
Why are cops allowed to go home at the end of their shift and grab as much alcohol as they want?
Yeah.
And we know an alcoholic. Everybody knows an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Everybody knows somebody who's maybe. I've personally abused alcohol and had a terrible relationship with it. And we all know the destruction that alcohol does in this country, does to your body, physically, mentally. How many people die a year from alcohol poisoning? And this is where I get to get on my soapbox for a minute. Even the Drug Enforcement Administration themselves has stated that nobody's ever died from ingestion of cannabis alone. Have people been stupid, gotten high, gotten whatever? Yes. But I'm talking about from the actual ingestion itself, they never died. There's not a documented case. And if there was a documented case, that would be plastered all over the news. So it's one of these things where when I take a look at the law enforcement community, my whole goal and my whole purpose now has been to help the law enforcement officers to be better officers, so that when a call comes, when a bad call comes, they can process it and be there emotionally. And they have to be detached emotionally, but they can deal with their own emotions at the end of shift. They can be there and present in the moment to make the best judgment calls, and to have good interactions with the public, and to also not be persuaded by their previous interactions regarding cannabis. Just because you arrested a stoner who smoked cannabis and was driving doesn't mean all stoners are bad.
That's right. Well, you guys, hope you guys process all that. There's a lot of information in there, and for those out there who use cannabis to kind of like medicate, hey man, you know, even though it has certain connotations, I've seen how it's helped a lot of people, and I think we need to, have more conversations with its medical purposes. And we're gonna have all your links in the description for people
Thank
to get
you.
hold of you. So, excuse me. There you guys have it. Big Herc 916 AJ. You'll be able to contact him and his links. If you're in law enforcement, reach out to him. We know that a lot of people need to have this conversation. They're in stressful jobs and nobody wants to seem like they're weak. So a lot of times people like, oh man, I don't want to talk about it, or you put a mask on and you pretend, and then it implodes. And it's something that if you can at least get it out, maybe you can kind of prevent something else from happening that could be more negative. So, AJ, man, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing about that. But I think that's a conversation because a lot of people vilify law enforcement, even talking to law enforcement. Oh man, you're talking to police, man. But it's a job, man. And
It
at the
is.
end of the day, these people, if you have a situation, you want to be able to call somebody who's in the right mind to come help you, and you want to be able to have a conversation and not feel like you guys are butting heads.
Right.
So I think more dialogues like this need to happen, especially coming from somebody who was in law enforcement and somebody who's been on the other side. So I thank you for sharing, and yeah, you guys, there you have it. Big Herc 916 Fresh Out and AJ. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
You guys hit that subscribe button.